Welcome to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. I'm your host, Johnny Mango. This is the place where we inquire about lifestyle, culture, and careers. Weekly, we meet with new guests that make a contribution of their insightful stories about their careers and how those careers impact their lifestyle and culture. Hello, everybody. This is Johnny, and welcome to Minutes with Mango. Today, we have a very interesting guest who's had a professional career in IT and became a church pastor and knows a lot about spirituality, but he's made a connection between music, conventional music, and spirituality. And we're going to talk about that today because I think it's really kind of cool and interesting. I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Fehn. Hello, Jeff. Welcome.
Hi, Johnny. Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Yeah. How did you make the connection with spirituality and contemporary music?
The story goes to a couple of years ago when I was nearing the point where I felt like I was going to retire from pastoring the church.
Yeah.
And was sort of starting to think about, okay, what's next? You know, what does God want me to do? And so we were on vacation and had sort of a random thought about Jennifer Nettles, who is a singer, actress, has done an awful lot. Well, there was a song of hers that I just really connected with. It's called, oh gosh, now my mind's drawn a blank.
Life is Sweet.
That's it. Life is Sweet. Yes, thank you. And I'm listening to that in the gym, and it just really struck me how close to the gospel her lyrics were, and how it spoke about a lot of the things that Jesus speaks about in the Gospels. And so that really got me thinking. Prior to that, I had done some soul searching on my own and reading some other books, and had decided that the things that I was really passionate about were my faith, where it was music, and then also I really enjoyed writing. Putting sermons together was always one of the things that I really enjoyed about being a pastor, among the other things. And so starting to kind of think, okay, well, maybe, because when I first came up with those three things, I was like, well, how in the world do these three things connect? They seemed like they were completely separate of one another. Well, hearing her song and then going back and doing some of the research into why it was she wrote it and who she was speaking about really cemented this idea that there might be more in terms of spirituality in a lot of popular music.
Yeah.
And so it was at that point that I really started to do some research and found a number of songs that kind of fit that. And that's kind of the whole genesis of the book.
I noticed in your book you describe the song and then you add a biblical citation with the songs.
Right.
How did you, that seemed like it'd be a lot of work. Of course, you're the pastor, so maybe you know all the connections, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times, I mean, the song and the message just kind of, okay, I kind of knew where a text that would support that or that would sort of fit with that was. In other times, I did use AI periodically just to say, okay, here is a snippet of lyric. What gospel or biblical passage goes well with that?
Yeah.
And so that would give me some ideas, and then I would kind of look them over and decide which one I thought made the most sense, and then I would use that to then proceed to write that the rest of the chapter with.
So tell us about your book. Tell us how it's laid out, and we've learned how you've started to put it together, but tell us how you've laid it out. If somebody bought your book, what would they get?
Well, it starts out with each chapter is titled after the song that is in that chapter. So to use your example, Beer with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so you then see who the authors or the lyricists of the song were, and then who recorded it. Generally, a lot of the times it's the same individual, but sometimes not. A lot of the Nashville, songwriters write songs and then sell them to artists that may or may not have participated in the writing process. And then there's the snippet of lyrics that I really felt was representative of something biblical or spiritual, some idea or whatever that you could find in the Bible. Those are there. I've included a QR code, which allows the reader, if they so desire, say it's a song they've never heard before.
Yeah.
Well, they can snap that QR code and it takes them directly into Spotify
Oh,
where they can
really?
listen to the song. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
And so following that, I did a fair amount of research where I looked up to try to find out, okay, what was the reason this song was written?
Yeah.
How did that all come about? That's really the rest of the first half of the chapter. Then, as you indicated, there's a scripture that sort of pairs up with the lyrics and whatever
Hmm.
message the lyrics are giving. And then I just kind of did some exposition on, what that means or what it represents or how to apply that to your life in some cases. And so that's the chapter. And then I've also included a number of discussion questions that could be used if you choose to use the book in a group discussion setting, like a
Yeah.
Bible study or whatever, or if you're just reading it on your own and just want something a little extra to think about.
Right. It's some pretty interesting songs on your list.
Yeah,
By
it's a wide variety, isn't it?
yeah, by some pretty famous people like "Learn to Be Still" by the Eagles, and
Yeah,
"One of Us" by Joan Osborne, and "Dust in the Wind." I remember that one by Kansas.
yeah,
That's an oldie, but
yeah. It's interesting. The one by the Eagles, "Learn to Be Still," was actually when I first realized that there could be a connection between music and spirituality because it wasn't that long. I grew up Catholic, sort of then decided in my 20s and early 30s to start attending Protestant churches,
yeah,
Methodist, and so forth. And so I was still sort of investigating all of that when that album came out, which I think was 1994.
uh-huh.
That was when their reunion tour, when Hell Freezes Over, came back.
Yeah,
So I had the album and I listened to that, and listening to that song was what really spoke to me. Like, wow, it seems like he's talking about, because there's a line in there about we're all like sheep without a shepherd,
yeah,
which is how Jesus describes, the masses and so forth. And so that was really the first time I kind of noticed that there could be this link between what a lyricist or an artist was saying and something that was scriptural, even if they didn't really intend for it to be an overtly spiritual or religious song.
yeah. Have you ever reached out to any of these artists or songwriters to get their perspective?
I've tried.
Have you?
It's extremely difficult to get
Yeah.
past the wall of agents and
Yeah,
publicists
yeah, yeah, I
and all
know.
that. I mean, I
Yeah,
really, my ideal would have been to contact Jennifer Nettles and see if she would have written an introduction for the book.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I never could never get close enough to
yeah,
connect. And I understand
yeah,
they're busy and they
yeah,
probably deal with a lot of requests and so forth. So,
yeah,
but I would love to because that really that barrier in terms of getting to some of these artists really forced me into choosing songs that I could find some background information on somewhere.
yeah.
There was a song is a song by Chris Stapleton.
Uh-huh.
It's called the Drunkard's Prayer,
Yeah.
and it's a terrific song. And it just really connected with me because there's a line in there that says, "I wish that I could go to church, but I'm too ashamed of me."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, that is so often something that we as pastors hear as a reason given to why someone doesn't come to church. It's because they think they have to get their life cleaned up,
Right, right.
before they go,
Yeah.
which is completely
I
opposite
was
of
just
the
gonna
way
say
the
that's the
gospel
other.
works.
Yeah.
But it's a very common
Uh,
thought. And
right.
so I loved that, oh, wow, that's a perfect song to sort of be able to address that. But there's nothing, I could find nothing on that song as to why he wrote it or how it came about. So I
What's the
really
name of
couldn't use it.
what's the name of
It's
that
called
song?
A Drunkard's Prayer.
So your book, The Rock, Pop, and Country Gospel is the name of your book. And are you planning to do any more?
I would really like to. A lot of it depends on how much access I might be able to get. As I
Yeah.
said, finding the backstories was the difficult part in many cases. And
Right.
so I know there are a number of other songs out there that would fit, into this.
Sure.
But it's just a question of whether or not I could get enough information about how they came about
Yeah.
to make a book worthwhile, to
Yeah.
actually have enough for a book.
Yeah. What song in that book had the most impact on you?
Well, as I said, Learn to Be Still probably had the initial impact.
Yeah.
Another one that I always had that I grew up with, and you may have too, was Spirit in the Sky
Oh,
by,
yeah. Yeah, I
um,
saw that on the list. I went, yeah.
yeah. And so
Couple of old guys here.
that's exactly right. And proud of it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Um, so Norman Greenbaum, I mean, I knew the artist's name, and I knew that sounded an awful lot like a Jewish name, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And
Greenbaum, yeah.
so I was always kind of fascinated because there's a lyric in that song that says, I've never been a sinner, I've never sinned. And I thought, well, that's not exactly the way the gospel reads.
Yeah.
It says exactly the opposite. All
Uh-huh.
have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So I was always really curious as to how that came about. And
Yeah.
so that was one that I was especially anxious to do some research on. Unfortunately, there's a lot out there about it. And
Uh-huh.
essentially, the story is pretty interesting. He was trying to make it in the music business and, was not having a lot of success. And so he was, I think, watching a Porter Wagner show on TV. And they were, singing. It was a song that was Christian themed. And he was like, well, I could write something like that.
Yeah.
So he sits down and writes out this song. But again, he really doesn't know anything about Christianity. And he sticks that line in there. And it was only afterwards that it was pointed out to him that isn't exactly the way that Christianity works. And he has publicly said, gosh, if I'd, had I known better, I could have made it differently. And
Yeah.
there's artists that have covered that song since then that changed that lyric a little bit to make
Oh,
it make a
really?
little bit more sense
Yeah.
to a Christian audience.
Do you think some of these songwriters and artists, when they write these songs, you think they're picking some of these themes up from, just from the ethers of the spirit, just kind of coming to them, and they're writing and they're dropping these different lines and these different subjects together and that kind of thing? You think it's just kind of a magical type of thing, how they come about to writing these songs? You
I
never
think
have any?
that's I think that's clearly a possibility for some of them because there are some that there clearly was no intent for it to be,
Yeah,
a spiritual or religious song.
yeah,
Others of these songs clearly are, but they're released into the mainstream rather than showing up on some Christian radio station.
right,
So I
right,
think there's definitely an influence there,
yeah,
where, they have whether it's something that just kind of occurs to them or, in the moment they
yeah.
flash back to vacation Bible school when they were a kid, something
Yeah.
like that causes them to then put something like that into their song. So,
So,
you know,
yeah, one thing I've learned about songwriters, I have a little. I'll be honest with you. I have a little bit of. I have a son who's a professional musician, so and he lives in Nashville. But one thing I've learned in talking to him, a lot of these songwriters really, it's multiple talents that come together. In other words, it's usually a songwriting group, not just one person, but
mhm,
2, 3 people that sit down and crank out the song. And so there's a collaborative, from what I've learned, there's a collaborative experience taking place
mhm.
when they write these songs. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that I've picked up along the way was that for most of his career, Tom Petty wrote
mhm.
his own songs, and
Yeah,
there was no one else. Mark
right.
Campbell, his bandmate, did a lot of the music for him,
Sure.
but he wrote the lyrics. And
Right.
then when he became part of the Traveling Wilburys,
Mm-hmm.
that's when he was introduced to this whole idea of collaborative songwriting.
Oh, okay.
So, he and George Harrison
Yeah.
and, all these other guys that were in that band that were well-known musicians, Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
they would just sit around and throw out lines.
Right. In fact, I've heard that what's the one famous song from the Wolverines? I think it was the first one. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was from a band. It was a label on a band case sitting in the garage when they were all sitting around, and that's how the song came about. They saw
Right.
this song, the sign, and so well, let's write about that. We'll just
Mhm.
use that and go.
Yeah, some of the origin stories of these songs are pretty hilarious.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
you think they're these, really deep, lyrics, and like you said, they're writing about a bumper sticker they saw on a band, on a guitar case or something. It's
Right, right. Or their old girlfriend, one or the other.
yeah. But I think the interesting thing is that, you'll in a lot of cases, you'll ask them, okay, well, or people will ask them, well, what does this mean? And in many cases, they really leave it open to interpretation and just say it, however it speaks to you is what it means.
Right, right. Yeah,
And I mean, I
yeah,
think that's especially the case, speaking of Tom Petty, with the song, that's in the book that's his, I Won't Back Down.
right,
Um, Yeah, I don't think he had any sort of a faith life that I've
right.
been able to tell based on
Hmm.
what I've read. But some of the lines in there, they can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down.
Right.
Are clearly, biblically influenced, or at least biblically adjacent.
Yeah,
Um, and so don't know that he necessarily intended for that to be the case. And it'd be interesting if he were alive to be able to ask him, well,
yeah.
how did you come up with that particular lyric?
Uh-huh.
Because that's clearly right out of the Bible. So
Yeah. Well, he might have heard about that in Vacation Bible School when he
it's
was 8
entirely
years old.
possible.
You know,
Yeah, right.
people people carry things with them to their
Well,
life.
I always
I
thought it was interesting. I have a pastor friend who we'd shared experiences about how some people are so cemented into what they believe based on what they heard in Vacation Bible School. And
really.
he referred to it as felt board theology. These, these teachers taught with those little figures on a felt board,
Right.
with Noah's Ark or
Yeah.
Daniel in the lion's den or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, these individuals never progressed further in their theological thinking than what they learned when they were 8.
Well, I think some of us are still there, but that's another story for another time. I noticed that you got Bridge Over Troubled Water on there by Simon and Garfunkel.
Mhm.
So yeah, I could see that one going up. And what's the connection with John 15:12 through 13 on that one?
Um, well, let me look. From what I remember, it's this idea that, what Jesus says is, whoever lays down his life, for a friend. He's talking about that idea of, um, the one who will actually lay down their life. And
Yeah,
so I think the connection that I made was that we are to be that bridge in someone else's life.
I see.
That, we have those
Yeah,
opportunities that come along fairly often.
yeah,
And, we always have a choice as to whether or not to engage or not. But that,
right.
essentially what Jesus is telling us is that when you have that opportunity, you can be that bridge for somebody else, just as
Right,
hopefully someone is that bridge for you when you're in a time of need.
right, right. Yeah. Wow, interesting. So what's next for you? What are you going to do next? You gonna write another book?
I would like to. I'm really trying to get this one to sell a little bit more at the moment, so that's
Oh,
kind of
really?
been my focus. Yeah, just
Yeah.
trying to use social media. I've got all my marketing materials together, so finally I'm going to hopefully start to hit some bookstores and
Uh-huh.
book shows and things like that, just to try to get the word out. Um, But yeah, I mean, I would love to write another one like this. I really, it really was a labor of love. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I liked the process of kind of putting the chapters together and then seeing, because the second half of each chapter, I've had a number of people say it doesn't, they don't necessarily go where you think they're going to go.
Ah.
You might read, the lyrics to the song and think, okay, well, I bet I know where he's going to go with this, and then I don't. It goes off in a different direction, and
Right.
I, some of them surprised me too. I wasn't necessarily thinking about that, and then that's just kind of where we ended up, and so I thought that was really cool to me. Again, it just speaks of God's role in all of this.
Right. Right.
God chose a lot of the songs. It was amazing how often I would go to the gym and I'd put a playlist on, and a song would come on that I had never heard before.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, that could really fit. And so I would make a note of it, and then I'd run home afterwards and see if I could find information about it so I could include it. And I would say about half a dozen times or so, something like that happened.
So that's Spotify's algorithm figuring out what you're listening to is what that
Exactly.
is. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I would use
Pretty interesting.
their DJ and just,
Yeah.
so that he would introduce, these new songs, and it was
Yeah.
like, wow, that'll work.
So how can people find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's on
Okay.
Amazon and barnesandnoble.com both.
Okay.
I do have a website where it's available, and if you go to the website, there is a lot of there's some more detail about the book. There's a sample
Right.
chapter there that if
Mhm.
they want to kind of understand how this works, it's one that's not in the book. It's like an extra one that I wrote,
I see.
um, that will sort of help them see, okay, well, and it's exactly as it would be in the book. It has all the same elements in terms of the song, the background, the scripture, and the discussion questions are all there. So you can kind of get an idea of what you're
Right.
getting, and it is available um, on that website as well.
Yeah.
So those are the main ways right now.
Okay. So, and your website is
It's
same as the book, right?
right. It's rockpopcountrygospel.com.
Easy. Okay. Rockpopcountrygospel.com. I say it right?
That's right.
Okay. Good. Good. Well, that's great. I got a few other things I'd like to talk to you about since you're hanging around here.
Sure.
Let's talk about some other topics, and you got a few minutes to talk about faith amid doubt
Sure.
and questioning and things like that. What are your feelings on that? What kind of insight can you provide our listeners?
You mean, I want to make sure I understand your question. So you're talking about having faith amidst having doubts about
Right.
Christianity and the whole story and everything?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, I think it's something that everybody deals with to one extent or another,
Hmm.
some to a greater degree, others to a lesser. And I think that, it's what some people there are people that tend to equate their faith with feelings.
Hmm.
And so it's like, well, I don't I don't feel like this is true, or I'm not feeling God's presence right now, or a number of kind of
Yeah.
feeling type
Yeah.
responses. And faith is not at all about your feelings.
Hmm.
It's about having belief in something that you can't see or
Yeah.
feel.
A commitment. I would
Right.
think it's a commitment.
Right. And so it's really important, I think, to not abandon that, to continue you can search for answers, but to just give up or to say, well, I'm just, not going to believe anymore because I can't find, proof or whatever it
Right.
is that you're looking for, because you're only going to find but so much. I mean, as a number of other authors have indicated, there is more written testament to the Gospels than there is to Julius Caesar or any number of
Right.
other world leaders or events.
Right.
There's far more documented evidence about Jesus than there is about them, and yet that's what tends to, to dominate people's thoughts is that, well, I just don't know if Jesus is real, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's just about kind of having the perseverance that Jesus
Yeah.
talks about, where you just have to keep believing even in those times when it's difficult.
Can't stop believing.
To quote Journey, you're right.
God, I'm bad. Faith. I've always thought faith is like a commitment. That if you're not committed to it, and if you're trying to prove it all the time, you'll never get there because it's
Right.
kind of it's a commitment. That's step one is a commitment, and I think there is a lot of doubt out there. There is a lot of people, although I see the religious world shifting a little bit to less about traditional religion and more towards spirituality. In other words, the precepts of religion are starting to become incorporated in what's called spirituality.
Right.
Whereas 40 years ago, maybe it's religion, but now it's kind of looser, broader thing. Besides Christianity, there's the whole Hindu thing, and there's the Muslim thing, and all kinds of different elements. Those are religion type stuff, but there's also what I'm seeing as kind of an inward. I'm going to live these precepts of spirituality that are common amongst all those religions. Actually, I mean, I've read some comparative religion stuff, and they all have basically the golden rule in them, and those types of things. They all
Right.
Each one of them has that. There's a whole long list of how they are all compared. I'm trying to think what book I read that in, but
yeah, I mean, I think people have always searched for truth and for meaning in life, right?
Yeah.
And it's with these generations that have been coming up recently, X and Y and Z, to some extent, they weren't brought up in church.
Right.
And so they don't have that as their background, which is why I think it's a little bit difficult to convince them to go. That's just not something that they're familiar with at all. Whereas, our generation, that's what we did. That was, Sundays were about going to church.
Your mom and dad said, get your ass to church. How that worked.
That is pretty much how it worked in my house. Yeah.
Well, but on the flip side, I've been reading some articles that like the Catholic Church is starting to explode with young people, which is kind of surprising. Like they're somehow finding that I'm wondering if there's, and other churches too, not just the Catholic Church, but I wonder if these young, like you said, the X and Y and Zers are finding some type of emptiness in their life and realizing they need something to fill in the gap.
I think it's that. And I also think to an extent it's the structure that the Catholic faith provides. Because you have a lot of these kids starting, with the latchkey kids of probably a generation ago, who didn't have a lot of structure. Mom wasn't always home when they came home from school. And so they were on their own a lot. And one of the things that they really crave is that structure. And so the Catholic Church provides a lot of that because they have a much more structured liturgy than many Protestant churches do. And I'll tell you a really interesting book to read. That's J.D. Vance's new book called Communion. And it's about his whole search for faith. And because he ended up becoming Catholic, though that's not how he was raised. Right. And he's a particularly intellectual guy. And so one of the things that appealed to him was a lot of the Catholic the documents that have been written and their positions on things, as well as just the tradition that stretches back several thousand years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for him, that was particularly appealing,
Yeah.
um, because he really is a thinker. He's not much of a feeler at all, at least as he describes himself.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting book just to kind of get a sense of what led him to that decision.
Right. Yeah. I read his first book and I saw his movie, um, and so yeah, I'll have to pick that up. It's called Communion.
Hmm.
Interesting title for a book about Catholicism, but
It is.
okay. Okay. What about gratitude? What are your thoughts on gratitude? I th-
Well, I'm for it. Um, um, I don't know that there's enough of it.
yeah.
I think we need to be a lot more thankful for, um, and in some cases, I think maybe if you're a person of faith, then it really ought to go back to the fact that you look at God as the ultimate provider of everything.
Yeah.
From your life to the air you breathe to what keeps you alive and so forth. And if we really stop and think about that, we should be grateful,
Yeah. Yeah.
for all of those things. And yet we all, myself included, tend to take many of those things and many others for granted and just
Yeah.
don't think about where they came from or even think to thank anybody
Yeah.
for providing those.
It's almost like we're in a reverse culture right now with everybody complaining about everything all the time. Politics is all about complaining. Now you can pick a side; they're both doing it.
I agree.
And nothing's right when we have all these wonderful things around us that we should be grateful for. We don't have to walk to the store. We got a car to get in and go, or take Uber or whatever.
Right.
Just little things like that. We all have food on the table, and most of the time, I live in Western North Carolina, where we got hit with a hurricane last year, and didn't have any. I didn't have any water for a month. That was an interesting
Oh,
experience.
man. Yeah,
Talk
I'll
about
bet.
talk about gratefulness after after that.
Yeah.
And the power was. I have a generator, but after about 5 days, it stopped playing, and
Mhm.
the cool thing was, my kids came home. They wanted to help out, and the girlfriends came, and a couple little kids, and we had about 8 people here, 9 people for a month.
Sounds
But
like
you
you're
know
doing
what?
some, indoor
Eh,
camping.
oh, yeah, it was. And with my 40 cases of bottled water in the living room floor, because you gotta drink something. But
Yeah.
you know what was really most interesting about it? And I felt very grateful about this. Everybody sat around the table at night and had dinner. It was like Thanksgiving every night
Yeah.
with candles,
Yeah.
and everybody pitched in. There was no conflicts. There was just everybody helped out, and all the neighbors helped out. Everywhere you went around town, there was tremendous
Mhm.
amount of help from outside the area. And so there's lots of
Yeah.
people that do things to help each other. And the churches played a big role in that. Samaritan's Purse played, of course, they're from this area, and they played a
Mhm.
huge role here.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, a huge, huge role. Yep.
We seem to always see that anytime there is some sort of a disaster like that. I can
Mhm.
remember, just how together the country felt after 9/11.
Right.
There was that sense of unity.
Yeah.
It didn't last all that long, but it was
No.
there for a while.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the same thing on a smaller scale, I think happens to something like when, a community like yours is damaged and destroyed.
Yeah.
Um, People just naturally sort of come together.
Yeah. I have a friend who lives on the other side of town there. If you live near a river, that's where you got in trouble.
Okay.
I live on a hill, unfortunately, but but I called him after finally when we got phone service. I said, "How you doing?" He said, "Oh, John," he says, "I got 4 feet of water all through my house."
Oh,
And he said, the guys from Samaritan Purse just showed up. Nobody called them. They showed up,
and they removed all my damage. All the furniture had to come out. All the cabinetry had to come out. And he said they had saws and they cut my drywall out up to 4 feet so it could be replaced. And I said, well, if nobody called them, how did they show up? He said, somebody was in a restaurant the day before and they overheard them talking about their neighborhood got flooded out. And these guys said, oh, what neighborhood is that? And they told him. They said, oh, okay. And the next thing, 20 guys showed up and just hit all these houses and cleaned them out and got them ready to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And, no questions asked, just we're here to help.
Yeah.
It was really fascinating to hear those stories.
Well, it's about living out the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And so often that is a far better witness than, me trying to tell you about Jesus or whatever. If I choose to live his, like
Right.
he tells us to, and we actually demonstrate that.
Right.
It's a powerful testimony.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to your next book. I think there's a lot of material out there for you, Jeff.
Well, thanks. I agree with you.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. And so, Jeff Fehn, I really appreciate you being here today. And thanks for sharing your wonderful book with us. And I hope a lot of people pick it up. It's very interesting. It's very contemporary. The songs that are in it, everybody knows most. Somebody's going to know a lot of them.
Oh,
a lot of people are going to know a lot of them.
That's right.
That's what I found when I saw the list. I went, wow, yeah, I know that song. So, Jeff, thanks again for being here.
Johnny, thank you. I really appreciate it.
You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. Subscribe to hear a new and unique guest each week as they comment on their life's journey and share experiences with lifestyle, culture, and career. You can always find us at minuteswithmango.com.